welcome back to Taking Off the Armor. Since this is a video about transparency and vulnerability, I want to start off just by making a couple confessions. I know I have not posted in a while. It's honestly because I've been battling my own inner voices and inner struggles. As a cancer survivor, sometimes speaking for myself, I get a little tripped up in just thinking about recurrence and how long I'll be here on earth as I'm playing with nephews or talking to friends, family, and everybody is planning for their future. I would be lying if I say that, sometimes I don't think, well, am I really going to be here for that long? So in battling with those thoughts, sometimes it's not easy to have these open discussions. It's easier to have them with people who have experienced cancer, but for those who haven't, it's just different. Sometimes you just won't understand things until you go through them. But I mean, in this instance, I wouldn't wish cancer on anyone. So that is where I've been. Today, I do have a guest, a friend, a sister, and it's people like this one that encouraged me through my journey. It kind of kept me going. And then people like this who are going to keep me accountable as I kind of shrink in the background and sometimes deal with thoughts or moments of paralysis due to fear. I got my tribe, I got my network that is going to keep pushing me forward and honestly just living in the present, not really worried about tomorrow because tomorrow is going to bring worries of its own. So just live fully in the present. So with that being said, today I have with me Stephanie.
Hello, everyone.
Stephanie, who are you? How do I know you? How did we meet? Like,
You know what? I don't know, our worlds collided. Let's first start out with the story of how we had to be partners, and neither of us were looking for partners.
Y'all, we being vulnerable. Stephanie is she's digging right in.
Very vulnerable.
Okay.
We met in a therapy group and were teamed up together for community to support one another. Now, this is pre your diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So we were both very hesitant. We're adults. We have our own lives. We had lots of things going on outside of, illnesses or anything else. But it was meant.
It was. At first, you couldn't convince either of us that it was meant to be.
It was meant. And I never would have guessed how much it was meant.
That's true.
So here we are, 3-4 years later. I honestly don't even know how long it's been, but it's been a long time.
It's been between 3 or 4 years. Time has flown
yeah.
so rapidly. But I mean, I just thought about when you said it was meant to be. Had it not been, had we not ended up in that group reluctant or not, some things would have panned out very differently. Very differently. So this is another thing. You end up in the pathway of people that you need to meet when it's time.
Absolutely.
There's a season for everything. There's a season for everybody. And I just looking back like, dang, I'm a little grateful. I'm grateful because when we were sitting in that therapy session, we just like, we don't want to be here.
Right.
Okay. So it's been about 3 or 4 years. So I got a series of questions. I already know that. We're going to talk organically, and wherever we lead or wherever we go, we will go. So Stephanie, should we use real names? Is that okay?
It's fine. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the reason why Stephanie said that it was meant to be is because when I was initially diagnosed, I was going to one healthcare facility. And Stephanie, do you remember how because I held it to myself for a minute, but it wasn't that long because I hadn't started treatments yet. I had got the port surgery, I got my screenings and everything, but I didn't get too far in the process. So when did...
From what I remember, it was shortly after, like very shortly after your port surgery.
Okay.
That you disclosed it. And this is the struggle that I was telling you all of the thoughts that I was thinking of last night. I was trying to get a timeline, and it really is a blur for me, as I'm sure it is for you.
Yep.
But I don't even know how the conversation went, but I knew immediately I have to help. I got to jump in. I have the best resource for you, or at least the best resource in my opinion.
She was the best resource.
So, immediately I started forward thinking. I couldn't let myself get too sad or too down. A lot of it because I don't want to be there. Like, I don't want to feel sad about things. And another part of it is because I had experienced it with someone close. So my very best friend was also diagnosed with a totally different type of cancer prior to your diagnosis, and then a different cancer diagnosis after your diagnosis. So she ended up, having two different types. So it just felt like, cancer was just closing in on my world. And I wanted to just literally get through this with everyone and keep everyone strong. So that was my main goal. It was hard.
I'm sure it was.
It was hard.
I'm sure it was.
Because you don't want to be overly positive, but you definitely don't want to be
a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, Debbie Downer.
Right.
You want to be understanding. Like, there's just so many emotions being a friend of a survivor that we go through. So, and a lot of people may not even take that into consideration. This is why I absolutely love what you're doing with this series, is getting the perspective of everyone, because it does affect everyone.
It absolutely does. So I told you, somehow you put two and two together. You connected me with your aunt, who had gone through her journey, I want to say maybe 5 years
About
prior.
5 years prior.
And her aunt ended up taking me under her wings. When I say taking me under her wings, I literally mean that. She was there day in, day out when I had appointments, when I was frustrated with providers and needed to vet with her, when I just didn't understand things, when information was coming at me left and right. She was there. And had it not been for Steph's aunt, the medical facility that I ended up at, I probably wouldn't have been there. So it literally was meant to be. So Steph, when you talk about your best friend, talk about your aunt, you've had several close people in your community who's impacted with cancer. So tell me how you felt hearing the diagnosis with your aunt, with your best friend, and then me coming along saying I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Let's start there. What went through your mind? What emotions were you feeling?
So I'll be very honest. I was feeling fear. Fear was the very first emotion, just because it was so consecutive. Maybe if it had been 10 years one person, 10 years another I would have been able to look at it differently. But my first initial emotion was fear. And it was fear of the unknown, of how can I support? What do I do? What can I even say? Sometimes you just don't have the words to even comfort someone in a situation. And every one of those instances, I felt that way. So once I came down from the fear, of the loved one, and just, all the unknown, it turned into just, okay, you got to be there. I did package it down, put it in the back of my mind, and pretend like it wasn't going on.
You got to do that sometimes.
Yep. So that's it's a tactic in my life. I won't say it's always good. You need balance with everything. So I can't, shouldn't always do that. But with your situation, it was definitely one of those things that if I put it in the back of my mind, you'll be fine. I'm going to check on you. we're going to be friends. We're going to kick it. So I'm going to see you're okay. I'm going to know you're okay. I'm going to call you. I'm going to be as much as of a support that I can for you. So I'm going to know you're going to be okay. That's how I was able to get through.
So you said something that kind of struck me, because when we go through things, it's easy to say, I want to be there for you, but you also have to think about the person on the other end. I'm sure they want you there for them, but in what capacity?
Right.
How much how much is enough? How much is too much? How do you know if you're being overbearing versus, just being there based on that person's needs? So I'm sure in all of the diagnoses, your interactions probably vary, but seeing that those relationships differ, how did you navigate kind of finding that sweet spot with folks? Because there's people out there getting diagnosed left and right, and I think that is a struggle. Understanding I want to be there, but it's hard. Like you said, I don't want to be too positive, but I don't want to be too negative. How do you find that balance?
So it was different in the different circumstance, with the different circumstances. And I will add, I forgot about my father. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So I also had that, element. So, a parent.
And was he before aunt and best friend?
He was before aunt, yes.
Okay.
And then it reoccurred. So it came back. Somewhere in between all of it.
So pause for a second. I'm gonna come back to finding that balance and knowing how to support the person.
Okay.
But listen to what you just said. So best friend got it or was diagnosed with a different type, and then years later it recurred in another organ.
Well, no, a totally separate cancer. So this is an anomaly. This is not. It's totally different. Totally different.
That proves what I'm about to say.
Right.
So completely different.
Yep.
You got dad who was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Years later, he's living, doing, and then gets diagnosed.
Yep.
So this is what I'm talking about. That fear of, you said for you, it was the unknown. For me, it's fear of the unknown too, because I don't know what's going to happen.
Correct.
And just seeing other survivors, seeing other people that, go through this journey. Some people are fortunate enough to make it, right?
Correct.
Some people are not as fortunate to make it out of a diagnosis. And then some people are fortunate to get diagnosed, be cured or be healed, get diagnosed again, and then be healed. It can turn out so many different ways. And this is the fear that I was talking about. This is the armor that you quickly put back on because you just don't know.
Right.
So, you got anything to add there before we go back?
No.
You sure? Okay.
Sure.
All right. So then, before I interrupted you, because as things pop up, I'm just going to talk about them. But we were talking about just determining how to support people and how you find that delicate balance in different situations.
So with my best friend, we have been friends 22 years, 23 years, a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
So
y'all friendship grown.
Yes, grown. I know her like the back of my hand. She is long distance. So there was a challenge there because I couldn't be present, physically present for everything. Right. But again, I tucked it in the back of my head and we had the same relationship, or continued the same relationship. I knew when things got tough. I knew, when she was tired, frustrated, ready to be over it, everything. And I just supported her the best way that I knew how. And I did go see her, saw her a lot, during this time period. Again, I don't have the actual times. For you, the blessing was we went to therapy.
True.
We have the same therapist. So we learned a lot of the same things. And then I just think generally we are alike in a lot of ways.
Very true.
For me, I would easily ask, am I doing too much? I'm texting you. I'm coming over here. I'm texting AJ. Am I doing too much? how are you today? Do you need anything?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really need anything? Am I doing too much? So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like because we had that relationship, and you will tell me and I will tell you that I feel like I did the best that I could, and it was exactly what was needed.
What if I told you you didn't?
Then I would be like, girl, how? How?
I'm just
Tell me
playing.
how.
I'm
No.
just playing, y'all. Steph was Johnny on the spot. When you say you called and you text, you called and you text. When you may have texted multiple times in 1 week, I think in the back of your head you was like, "Am I doing too much?"
Yeah.
But it never came off that way. You brought care packages, like you were there. And I'm just thinking about those who may have loved ones that are diagnosed, but they aren't really sure how to be supportive. So I think what you just stated is you have to base it off of the relationship of that person, kind of understand that person's personality. But I also don't think you weren't scared to have the conversation and say, hey, what is it that you need? How can I support you?
Right.
Going through this diagnosis, sometimes it's like I knew what I needed, but other times I had no idea. Before starting treatment, I didn't know, what being down would look like.
Right.
After having treatment a couple of weeks, I didn't know, like, I didn't know what my appetite was gonna be like. I didn't know any of that. Right. So I'm saying all that to say, I think it's very important to have conversations with the person who is diagnosed. And if you aren't getting anything, follow your intuition.
Exactly.
Follow your gut. If you have an instinct to say, okay, I know she said she cool, but her continence is a little off. Let me send a text. Send that text.
Exactly.
If you think, okay, well, I know that she needs to eat, but I know that her appetite might be a little off. Hey, let me just go get some soup and just say, look, I'm bringing you some soup. Don't ask, just do it.
Exactly.
And I think that's difficult for people because they want to respect people's boundaries, respect people's choices, and respect where they are.
And they want to get it right. So, and sometimes in this journey, you may not get it right, but whatever you do, if it's from the heart, it will be right.
It reaches the heart, right? So that's a good point, because we want to do everything just right. And in these journeys, everything ain't right, because if everything was right, we wouldn't be here.
Yep.
But like you said, if it comes from the heart, it will reach the heart. And I think looking back in retrospect, when folks came or texted or just brought things or sent things randomly, I think in the moment, it made me feel loved and supported in the toughest times. And I think you can attest, like, there weren't many times where I was just like, I just want this to be done. There were moments in the journey when I got like really tired. Like, hey, y'all, I don't want to go to this 6th treatment. I'm done. Like, nobody really knows about those moments outside of AJ and Marlo. But Seth, had you not bring that care package when I was having bone aches, stuff like that, I mean, it would have hit different. So the fact that you came and showed up, however that looked, text, phone call, care package, just looking in retrospect, that's the kind of stuff that kept me moving forward when I was just like, man, I'm in pain. My bones hurt. This is awful. That stuff goes a long way. So all of that to say, if you feel it in your heart, just do it.
Now, I'm still mad about Boston Market. I'm just going to bring that up. I don't know if you remember it. Remember how I ordered all that stuff and it didn't come? They canceled my DoorDash order.
Because Boston Market had closed and they didn't tell us, and they were still taking orders.
I was so mad.
Okay. Sorry, y'all. Y'all know I'm a little crybaby. I try to hide it, but that's just we being vulnerable. All right. So even though we are talking about how to support when you get news like this, a best friend, a auntie, a daddy, can it get any closer? Like,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, honestly. And in those moments, and as I talk about, the fear of the unknown for me, is there still fear of the unknown for you in all of these situations or diagnoses?
It is. It is. So the same fear that you carry of, it potentially being reoccurring is a same fear that I carry. However, I've learned even in my own life to live in the present and to live in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So while, reoccurrence is a very real thing, it's just not something that I'm going to dwell in and allow to lead me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 100% going to live in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the present moment is wonderful. It's wonderful.
Okay. And the next question was, how do you release and get support?
Oh.
And no, it's
Oh,
fine. It's
okay.
fine. I think you answered that by just saying you want to live in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But in those moments when best friend was going through treatment and you saw her at her weakest, or
Mm-hmm.
daddy was going through whatever, like in those moments, I know we talked about, you kind of tucking it to the back of your head.
Mm-hmm.
But like those moments, you need to support too.
Right.
So then, do you openly talk about the support you need with others,
I
or how did you kind of cope with that?
So that was number one. I definitely had to have a crutch to basically pour my heart out. There were times, with everyone's diagnosis, I get the information, I listen to it, I process it. I cried for each and every person, for each and every one of you all. I cried. And it was a release, it needed to happen. I feel like it was natural, it needed to happen. Um, but then as the process goes on, as like you said, treatments and illnesses and pain and just the different things um that you all go through, I 100% needed someone to talk to. So if it wasn't my therapist, it was my partner. And he has been amazing in every aspect. Like, he's been like a second backup therapist.
Shout out therapist, shout out partner.
So I'm thankful for that outlet, because if I didn't have that outlet, I'm not sure how much of a support I would have been for you.
So nuggets right there. Somebody get diagnosed in your circle. Don't try to process it yourself.
Not at all.
Talk to it. Talk to someone else about it. And I think you mentioned crying, and I think a lot of times we don't realize that all of this includes the grieving process,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you're grieving about the diagnosis, you're grieving about the unknowns, you're grieving about the process, and you have to go through the grieving process. So the fact that you allowed yourself to feel, grieve, talk about it, but then pull yourself back to say, this is what happened, this is where we are, but at the same time we are in the present, we still have life, and life is amazing. Yep. Right? Because it can look completely different.
Correct.
Correct. And this is the accountability that I'm talking about, because as I struggle with those same emotions, I have to bring myself back to it and just say, look, you made it through that.
Yep.
Let's just stay here for a minute.
Yes.
If something happens in the future, we'll worry about that in the future. Right. But that's easier said than done.
It is. It is with life in general. But if we keep that in the forefront of our mind, then we'll end up where we need to be.
Yeah. So true. Okay. So I'm not gonna ask you about the timeline, because I was gonna say, just going back, your dad's diagnosis was it 10
I'll say about 10 years ago. Yeah.
So okay, so cancer, or they say the C word because I don't know why they don't want to say it. But you hear about it all the time, right?
Yep.
And I think in a previous episode I talked about hearing about it, but feeling like, I don't want to say invincible,
untouchable,
but just being like, oh, okay, I know it exists. I know folks are diagnosed, but I didn't have the same perspective about it that I have now.
Right.
So prior to everybody being diagnosed, I mean, were you as aware of cancer? I don't want to ask, did it hit you as hard? Because I feel like that's an obvious question, right. But
so for me, my exposure or knowledge and experience of cancer was probably not typical because I work in the healthcare field. Yep. Okay. So okay. I worked in a children's hospital for many years, almost, I think about 10 years. And I actually rounded the particular job that I had, I rounded the floor. So I saw the children. Mm-hmm. And we did have a cancer wing. So I did see children with cancer. So my take on cancer was very visual. Not only having the knowledge of, knowing what it means and, how it will affect people and, the different medicines that are needed and the different types of cancers, it's just so much. All of that encompassed, it was visual for me. It was very visual for me. So my dad being diagnosed was not, it hit hard because it's my dad. Mm-hmm. But again, once I got past that first fear, then that letdown of grief, I tucked it away and said, you're going to be fine. People come to the hospital, get treated all the time, go home and live, and they're fine. Mm-hmm. So that's the mindset that's kind of the process that I have.
So Soph, I didn't know that you had actually seen it in kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, a cancer diagnosis is a cancer diagnosis. Right. But in adult versus kids, I mean, it's a kid. I'm thinking about how the heck did I get through as a 35-year-old woman versus a 5-year-old going through very similar things. Yes. And now that you said that, I'm just thinking about, had I seen, so I saw the visuals on TV, but the visuals on TV, only thing you see is people losing their hair, and then the movies make them look very awful. And I lost my hair, but I still was bad. Yep. I mean, facts. That was very vague. But I'm gonna pop back. But everybody's journey is different, right? But having the visuals, if I would have had the visuals of the worst, right, and then had people diagnosed, like, I would be running so much stuff through my head. And now I'm just thinking, like, was it that? Did you experience that at all? I did not.
And that's a very real thing. Mm-hmm. That, I could have, again, taken it for doom each and every time. And I refuse to live in that state. Mm-hmm. Yep. I refuse to accept that. For anyone.
You bomb, because I'm still a work in progress. So then everybody is pretty much in remission or doing well and fighting through.
Yes.
Does the dynamics of your relationships with all of us change? Did it? Does it?
I would honestly have to say our relationship changed. I believe it made us closer. Mm-hmm. And more like family. I know your mama, your sister, your nephews, your sister husband, your daddy, your husband. Like, I feel like everybody. Family.
No, don't, Mama, if you listening, spare her, don't call her. She doesn't.
I'll call you back, family. I promise.
She knows she's family.
So yes, I don't know where we would have been had you not been diagnosed. I know we would be friends, and I just don't know if we would have, made it here. And it's a wonderful thing. Again, going back to, man, if we were really resistant, we would have missed out.
We would have missed out on some good support. So much. Yep. I think in a previous episode I talked about my tribe and being here in Phoenix as opposed to being back home in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And while my immediate family traveled back and forth frequently, I had to rely on my Phoenix network. And I want to say 60% of my Phoenix network that were aware. No, I'm going to increase that, because if I talk about the population that was aware, 80% was the tribe. So it's a group of 8 of us, 9 of us. And had we been resistant and, you know, had our therapist just said, hey, I don't want to hear y'all mouth, just leave my group.
Yep.
We wouldn't be here. I don't know what my journey would have looked like at the other facility. Right. So thank you, therapist, for dealing with us. We appreciate you, and we are so happy that you put that women's group together for community, because we all have community because of it.
100%.
So this is the last question, but then I'm gonna open it up to see if there is anything you want to chop it up about. I hope this is helpful for us collectively, but I hope it's helpful for the audience as well. So as people might be watching this and may have a friend that was just diagnosed, or have friend, loved one, whoever was diagnosed a while ago, but you know they weren't present or whatever. What advice or just words of wisdom would you give them? And it could be related to, you know, support, showing up, or anything.
I'd first start with, and this is probably me more so speaking to myself, my former self. Don't worry so much about what support looks like. We talked about it, you know, a little bit. Support can be anything. Don't focus on if your support is right or wrong, or if you're doing the right or wrong thing. Just focus on helping, being there for the person in your capacity. So
wait, what you say?
Within your capacity.
Okay, you said within your capacity, meaning what does that mean? Because I don't wanna give false definitions. I want you to define that.
Meaning, if you are not 100%, you cannot support anybody else. So make sure you are taking the time to take care of yourself, so you can be of a support for someone else. Okay. And if that means I can't be there 5 days, but I can be there one, come that one day, because that one day may be the day that is needed. Exactly. So, you know, there is no right or wrong support. It's not too much, it's not too little. Just do the best that you can.
Okay. We're gonna clap it up for that. Because in your capacity, if it's not in your capacity, don't do it.
Yes.
So I realized I missed one question that I do want to go back to.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up. But the question was, during and post diagnosis, and this could be with anybody. I'm gonna ask this question, and it's okay if the answer is redundant, because I know we've touched on it a little bit, but each of these diagnoses were at a different time of your life, where you were probably in different seasons with kids, relationships, work, living arrangements, being here versus back in the Midwest. Like, what did you learn about yourself in those moments?
I learned that I was very flexible. And what I mean by flexible is, one, I was able to move away. You know, my dad was diagnosed. I literally didn't want to leave his side. You know, just for fear of the unknown. But I, you know, was going through a couple things in life, had a divorce, you know, different life things, and, you know, picked up and moved all the way to Arizona. So, everyone being diagnosed required for me to be flexible. I had to, I guess, read the room, for lack of better words, to see where I was needed and to see how I could support, and, you know, just where I could be of assistance. So that required me to be flexible.
And you didn't realize that you were flexible?
Not at all. Not at all. I feel like I have lots of rigid traits, and if it doesn't happen this way, then I'm not dealing with it.
Soph, when I asked that question, the word rigid popped up in my mind, because I'm just thinking, like, you know, I think you might be right. I think I'm the same way. Like I need structure. I need
Yes.
black and white. There is no gray. So that flexibility.
Yep. And there is no black and white with this. There's no black and white.
Everything about it is very much gray.
Yep.
Everything. Okay. All fair. I think we've covered pretty much everything that I had on my little outline. Oh, okay. One last question because
Okay.
I said this 3 times ago. But the last question, no, but again, this is again,
Maybe
it might be redundant, but it's okay. How did the diagnosis change the way you view or currently approach life?
Oh.
And I'm gonna ask a nested question. So, do you want me to ask you now or wait?
Wait.
Okay.
Let me answer this
Okay.
because mine is getting old. My little brain is getting old. Um. Wow. So outlook on life. It all goes back to how I process things, and like I said, some things need to go to the back of the brain and just exist and be there.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those things where I just have to live in the present. I think it's always going to come back to living in the present. I can worry about the past, I can worry about the future,
Mm-hmm.
I can worry about everything, or I can just be okay with being in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And, being a person who has supported people with the diagnosis, it really even if I'm giving the example of being a caretaker for them, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm here, or with my aunt or whatever, and I'm cooking for her, I can't worry about what's going on next week.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind tends to do that about
Mm-hmm.
everything else. So when helping in this situation, I really truly had to be in the present and deal with what was happening in the present.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that I have definitely incorporated in my life. Sometimes I have to tell myself to do it,
Mm-hmm.
or I have to, coach myself to do it
Yeah.
because, it's a
It's
practice,
conditioning.
right?
Yeah.
It's a practice, but that's definitely probably the most, I don't know the word,
Impactful
impactful, yeah,
life lesson.
that I've taken away from that is to live in the present.
Okay. So the nested question. You ready?
Yep.
So you talked about sucking things in the back of your mind. And I know that that is a coping mechanism uh, temporarily, but how do you, in those moments where you're just like tucking it away, you are probably faced with reality very quickly. So, how do I say this? How do you kind of get yourself together to say, okay, Stephanie, I know it's in the back of my head, but I gotta kind of bring it forward because this is the reality. I guess it goes back to living in the moment, but like, just how do you make sure you are not just suppressing and you're
Everything.
actually dealing?
So that's where having an outlet comes. So that's where the therapist is, and that is where, because you never know how that manifests. Pushing something back into your mind. For me, it typically manifests in an emotion.
Mm.
So, something may happen. I'm super duper sad. It could be an email I got at work. I'm super sad. I'm not super sad about that email.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the email. It's all of the things I've pushed back. Maybe some of them, all of them, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm working those things back out. So it is a, it's not a literal process, but it is a process.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I am going to say without therapy, it would probably be way more of a challenge.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So again, shout out to the therapist.
Shout out therapist. You've been shouted out 4 times if you watching this. Okay, so we are about at time. Is there anything that we have not covered that you were worried about or that you thought we would discuss that we didn't discuss?
No. The only thing that I have to say,
Stephanie, don't start.
is that I am truly thankful. I really, really am thankful that we decided that we were going to be partners and that you sent the initial text.
Did I?
You did. And I responded because I'm going to respond. I'm never going to leave anybody on red. But I'm just so thankful because you are way more than a friend. Like I said, I feel like I'm family. So
You are family.
and I'm glad that I was trusted to be in this journey with you.
Aww.
For however long it's gonna be.
Okay.
Hopefully it's like 100-ish, maybe. I don't know if I'm gonna live that long.
that would be, I mean, miraculous. I'm not gonna say that
well, right.
if it happens,
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know initially when I put this together, I think
you did
you
early in the preliminary stages. Yep. And I thought it was wonderful then.
Yeah, but I realize that this is not always the easiest thing. One, to just talk about a topic that's so sensitive, especially when it's hit home.
Right.
Years ago, months ago, weeks ago.
Right.
And then be vulnerable enough and open enough to, get on a public platform and actually have this conversation. So I don't take it lightly. I do appreciate you for responding to my request. You 4 years in strong.
Yes.
You got to respond at this point when you don't have to.
You're right.
But I do appreciate you for participating, and I love you.
You are so welcome. I love you too, Sophia.